Hello, all my YouTubers. It is my honor to show you today a little bit about the city where we live in Canada called Powell River, British Columbia. I hope you learned something. I hope you enjoy it. I hope it intrigues you to look further. Well, hello there. Welcome to My Life as a Landlord. Thank you so much for joining me. I am Dr. Jen, your podcast guru. This podcast is a predictable, rotating topic of landlord and tenant issues for both US and Canadian landlords and tenants. And then you might get another Salisbury adventure story in there, which is what you're getting today. Whenever possible, I invite experts to join me on a variety of topics while also pulling from my own experience with rentals on both sides of the border. After all, my goal is to educate both US and Canadian landlords and tenants who seek calm success. Thank you so much for joining me today. For all my YouTubers out there who are watching me at My Life as a Landlord, you will notice that my background has changed, and that's because my location has changed. This is the first episode that I am recording on Maui. Up until now, I've done all of my YouTube recordings in Powell River, British Columbia, which is what we're talking about today, but I'm not there anymore. Actually, as we were leaving, I said, it might be something to talk about Powell River, British Columbia. So where in the world is that? Well, I am pretty excited to tell you about it because that is where our Canadian life is, our rentals, and our Canadian business is based. And it's such an incredible city, an incredible area that's got natural resources and natural beauty. It's actually amazing. And I'm hoping that as you're listening to this podcast or you're watching on YouTube, that you'll find something that intrigues you and you go, oh, I wonder where that is. And yeah, chances are you may be intrigued, or very likely you may have already been to Powell River. Isn't that cool? That's all right. This is merely an introduction, by the way. I'm not going to be telling you super in depth about Powell River because they're incredible historians about Powell River who are going to be guests on the show moving forward. I am simply just going to introduce you. So this is Powell River 101. Yay. And I'm going to talk to you about three things. Where is Powell River located? Because it's kind of tucked away, unless you know where it is. I'll tell you a little bit about Powell River's story, a little bit about the story. Not a whole lot, but I'm going to give you enough background so you kind of know what's going on. And then why is Powell River so special? Powell River has got some pretty neat things going on. It's amazing, actually. Okay, so let's get to it. Where is Powell River located? Okay. So for my American friends who've never been to Canada, and I bet that's many of you, Canada, of course, is north of the border, north of Montana and North Dakota, and let's see, Washington State and Minnesota. So Canada's up above most of the time. For Michigan and New York, that Canada's up there as well. It dips a lot further south as you go east, but on the West Coast, it sits just proud right on the border, just bordering the north part of Washington State primarily, and that's British Columbia. So think of it as the California in the US, but move California up and make it a lot bigger, and that's British Columbia. Now, British Columbia does have a large island to the west of it called Vancouver Island, and on the south part of that Vancouver Island is the capital of British Columbia, known as Victoria. You may have heard of Victoria, British Columbia. On the mainland, though, most people are familiar with Vancouver. Vancouver was the site of the 2010 Winter Olympics, which is pretty neat. And the site was shared with Whistler, which is about 2 hours north of Vancouver. Pretty interesting how that all happened in 2010. You may have seen it. So Powell River is on the mainland, and it's about 100 miles north of Vancouver as the crow flies, but it's a bit tricky to get there. You can't just drive there. You have to take 2 ferries, or you have to fly there. That's your only options. There's no road to drive in or out at any time of day. You have to take either a ferry from Vancouver to the adjoining peninsula and then drive to the top of that peninsula and take a second ferry. So you've got to do that, or you've got to take a ferry from Vancouver to Vancouver Island, which is longer. Drive up to about halfway between, if you cut Vancouver Island halfway between top and bottom, there's a little town called Comox. There's lots going on in Comox, but they have a airport and they've got a ferry terminal and they've got actually a large military base. That's where the snowbirds typically practice. It's pretty neat. Snowbirds is like the Thunderbirds or the Blue Angels for the US. So the snowbirds are over there. You can see them flying around. But in Comox, there is a ferry. So you can take a ferry from Comox to Powell River, which is on the mainland. So that's how you can get there, either by walking or by taking your car, or if you were going to take a bus, either way, or you can fly. You can fly from Vancouver, Victoria, and you can fly from Calgary to Comox and then walk on the ferry, which is typically what Mike and I do. But you can also fly direct from Vancouver up to Powell River. Actually, now they've got seaplanes. Harbor Air operates seaplanes from downtown Vancouver up to Powell Lake, not to be confused with Lake Powell, which is in Utah. This is a different. Powell Lake is not in the States. It's Powell Lake is by Fall River. But again, it's only accessible by ferry or by plane or, by air. Okay, so the flights, they can be a little bit pricey, but it gets you there. Otherwise, the ferries can take a minimum of 6 hours if you're going to go from Vancouver up to Powell River. So you got to want to be there. You're going to want to get there and want to be there. But Powell River is very interesting. It's on the westernmost of the mainland, and it looks out at Vancouver Island. And as a result, you have some amazing sunsets. We have great sunsets on Maui. I would argue that Powell River sunsets are better. Okay, what else? Powell River, because it's on the mainland, you've got this incredible access to the ocean and water and all kinds of things going on with the water. And then you've also got the backcountry because it opens up into the mountains, which is really incredible. We're going to talk a little bit more about that here in just a bit. But let's talk about the story, Powell River story. I'm just going to briefly glance on it because the story is quite involved. But I can tell you that the First Nations were happily settled. There was lots of generations of First Nations that were settled where Powell River is. And when the European traders came and wanted to move there, they relocated the First Nation people. Now I'm going to say the name and I'm not doing it justice, but forgive me. So I've heard it pronounced Tlahaman or Tliaman or Sliaman, but the people are amazing and resilient and were completely self-sufficient because they were on the mouth of a river with salmon. The salmon were running, and the blackberries in that area are really wild. It's pretty incredible. And so when the Europeans showed up in the late 1700s into the early 1800s, the First Nations folks were moved north into the northern part of what is now the Powell River area. And where the Sliaman folks were, the traders put up a dam to power a mill, a paper mill, and very famous paper mill. At one time, it was the biggest one in the world. And as I mentioned, it's not just difficult to get to Powell River today. It was difficult when the Europeans were there. So typically there was very infrequent boats. The region was pretty much self-sufficient completely. They had dairies and farms and had their own sustainable food, which is a very foreign concept now, right? We're very dependent on food to be brought in. But back then, there was not, hourly ferries, and daily flights. It didn't happen. So as things progressed and the mill became bigger and had more paper machines and did more things and opened a craft mill, which was different paper, and some pretty incredible things happened. There was more money and more amenities were built. And so you had hockey arenas, the Powell River Complex, recreational complex, which has got pools. It's got 2 ice rinks. The music and arts and culture in Powell River continue to this day. And it was set throughout the 1900s. It was pretty incredible. Now I'm talking about a little town in Canada. Let me give you some stats on that. So let's see, here we go. In 2016, the city of Powell River had a population of just over 13,000, which was almost identical from 5 years previous. So Canada does the census 2011 and then 2016, and then 2021, I think it grew a little bit, but it remains to be one of the older. Average age is 50 something. The average age in Powell River is 50 something. And as a result, about 10 years ago, there was a big push to get a CAT scan machine in Powell River because so many people needed CAT scans, and they were having to either go to Vancouver or go to Vancouver Island to get their CAT scans. And they're quite pricey. It was about $3 million. And the people of Powell River raised it because they wanted a CAT scan machine in Powell River. And so there's a CAT scan machine in Powell River now. And so you've got people who've got medical security in Powell River, which is important when you've got aging folks and health issues. That's pretty incredible. So if you wondered a little bit more about the area itself, now I'm going in between kilometers and miles, so I apologize because I'm talking both for US and Canadians. But Powell River, the city itself is 29 square kilometers, and comparing with the British Columbia, the British Columbia is 922,000 square kilometers. So you've got 29 versus 922. I mean, it's pretty incredible. So population density is about 5 people per square kilometer in British Columbia. That's pretty interesting. So you've got a lot of boating in Powell River. You've got a lot of backcountry hiking. Deep inlet separates the area from the rest of the British Columbia mainland, which is really incredible because you've got these majestic mountains climbing. And as a result, there are many groups in Powell River, in the Powell River area, that are trail builders. They go out and they build trails and bridges, and they make it accessible for all kinds of ages. I mean, and you could do biking, and it's really incredible. A couple other things to note in Powell River is the highway runs. This is Highway 101, runs from the southern point of Chile and runs north. It runs all the way up the side of California, Oregon, Washington, and then it goes up through British Columbia and ends in Lund, British Columbia, which is in the Powell River area, Powell River Regional District, or now it's known as Quebec Regional District. They've renamed it after the Sliammon name, which is pretty incredible. So, but you've got mile 0 at Lund, British Columbia. So any of you have ever seen this, the road doesn't go any further north. That's it. Let's see. So I mentioned that when the mill was going, you had a lot of money, you had a lot of industry, you had a lot of very well-employed people. And as a result, you had a lot of development of cultural items, and a lot of music. Wait till I tell you all about the music that goes on in Powell River. So a music academy was built, and it's basically a school with classrooms, but guess what? All they teach is music. It's pretty incredible, and performances, really neat. And the other thing, Powell River boasts the nation's oldest continuously operating movie house, the Patricia Theater. Now, this is a single screen house, and it's really neat because it's quite old. It's painted. They just updated it to digital. There was a couple questions whether or not the Patricia Theater was actually going to be able to convert to digital, which was a requirement about 10 years ago. And so once again, the community rallied and said, we don't want the Patricia Theater sold or closed down. And so the donations came in, the conversion was made, and has since been taken over by the Friends of the Patricia Theater, which is a nonprofit that still operates the theater. So we do have a single screen movie theater. So if there's a movie that you're wanting to watch, you kind of have to wait your turn, but we do get them. Okay, back to music. One of the most amazing things I've ever seen is every other year, an international choir festival called Cathaumu, and you have to check the spelling on this, Cathaumu, which is a choral festival. And what it is choirs from all over the world are invited to come to Powell River to compete and perform and sing. And this was pre-COVID. Pre-COVID, they had 2,500 performers from 5 continents. And when I attended, there were 21 choirs, and these are international choirs. And some of them are quite small. Some of them are maybe 10 or 15 people, and some of them are like 80. I mean, it's incredible. And sometimes they fundraise not just to get to Canada, not just to get to Powell River, but they fundraise for hotel and food and things like that. But if the choirs can't afford that, then the community opens their homes and people stay in people's houses with them, which is really incredible when you think of it, that you've got people staying in the community. Also, there's the community, the most recent thing that has started, which is also amazing, it's called the Pacific Region International Summer Music Academy. Pacific Regional International Summer Music Academy. It's called PRISMA. PRISMA is the acronym. And what it is it is the symphonic musicians and faculty. They come from around the world and they hold classes and performances and just some of the most amazing musicians in general. And again, we have Powell Riverites who are internationally acclaimed singers, conductors. I mean, these people are incredible, and they live in little town of Powell River. It's just amazing. Wow. Okay, let's see, what else can I tell you about? Oh, water. The water off that mill is a deep seaport. And it was really interesting learning a little bit more about how that seaport worked in the mill, because I did my doctorate in Powell River, right? I studied the folks of Powell River, and that's where I did all of my interviews and focus groups, learning about intergenerational communication. It was all in Powell River, British Columbia. And along the way, I learned about the mill, and I learned about how the mill operated. And with this deep seaport, you have quite a bit of access. Big ships can come in, big barges can come in, but there's no breakwater, right? There's no way to protect it. And along those straits, if you've ever been in and around Vancouver Island, the wind and the waves can get nasty. And so they were trying to figure out a way to make a break so that you could protect the ships that were either transiting or the ones that were at the mill. And what they ended up doing was they ended up putting in ship hulks. They filled ship hulks with concrete and floated them out there, which is sort of counterintuitive. And they strung them together, and there's quite a few of them, 8 or 9, or maybe more. Forgive me, I don't remember how many hulks there are, but the hulks in Powell River are quite famous, and you can go right up to them because they're just abandoned ships that are designed to be a breakwater. And the whole idea here is that it protected the deep seaport because it was so deep. There was no way to dump material and build it up from the bottom to create a breakwater, and so they anchored the hulks. So if it's a chain of hulks and they're anchored on both sides, that is what is outside the Powell River Mill. Now, speaking of hulks, I learned something new. Now, Powell River is also known for its scuba diving, which I've never scuba dove in Powell River. That's kind of fun to say, scuba dove. But apparently, unbeknownst to me, I knew about the statue, but I didn't know that it was this famous. So Powell River is a destination for scuba divers worldwide as they come to see Canada's first underwater statue called the Emerald Princess, located 20 meters, about 60 feet below the surface. And I've seen pictures of the Emerald Princess. She looks a lot like the Little Mermaid when she's up on the rock. Very similar. But the divers apparently go nuts over diving on this. But because of the diving enthusiasts that come to Powell River, apparently another military ship, another hulk, was sunk. So they had added concrete to a former military ship and was sunk near Willingdon Beach Recreation Area as an artificial reef. Now, that's not very deep. That's not a super deep area. But again, you can tell that the people of Powell River and Powell River area, they think really hard about providing value to the folks that are coming to Powell River, which and to the residents, which is really neat. So if you've got what, Mike? Well, I'm recording a podcast. Okay. let me jump back into it. We're talking about the hulks, Willingdon Beach. Sorry, Sid. Willingdon Beach. Let's go back. In the backcountry, let's talk more about the backcountry. If you've got a dog or a canoe, or maybe both, you like the backcountry in Powell River. Because Powell River is on the ocean and it opens up into these mountains, you've got the trails. I mentioned that you've got trail builders and trail maintainers along the way. There are many huts, like overnight huts that you can camp in. There is one lake that's called Inland Lake, and Inland Lake is pretty neat because it has a almost perfectly level trail that has been maintained with all kinds of bridges and boardwalks and stuff that is almost wheelchair accessible, and it's 13 kilometers long. Like, it's pretty neat that this has happened. Now, for those of you who are in Powell River now, yes, there was some damage in the bridges and things like that, but I know that that's being taken care of, and hopefully by the time this airs, that's not an issue. Also, what is very famous, sorry. Okay, where is the other one? What is very famous is the canoes, the canoe portages, which who knew? Oh, here we go. Yeah, the Powell River Forest Canoe Route is a 57-kilometer, 8-lake, 5-portage journey that takes roughly 5 days. Now, for those of you who don't speak canoe, what a portage is it's an overland trail designed for you to carry your canoe. And it's incredible because they've added places where you can actually stop and put the canoe down as a rest and then keep going. And so it's designed for you to be able to carry your canoe from lake to lake to lake. And it's just amazing to me that people have created this. Now, further in the backcountry, you will find that there's been all kinds of history of logging. Logging industry is very, very big in Powell River, including the recently brought back logger sports, which Mike Salisbury, my husband, was part of the logger sports ages ago and was logger of the day. And when we were in Powell River this past summer, logger sports was just going on, including chainsaw carvings and pole climbs and all kinds of things. But in the backcountry is evidence of old trains, old camps with evidence of Chinese workers, because they found rice bowls and all kinds of china and all kinds of things. And even in the back part of Powell Lake, which, not to be confused with Powell River, but Powell Lake is a big freshwater lake. In the back of Powell Lake, there is evidence of an old homestead, post office, school, all kinds of incredible things that have since collapsed. The nature has taken over them, but you can see where the foundations are, which again, this all goes back into the story of Powell River. There's all kinds of stories about lost locomotives that have either burned up or got lost in lakes or got taken over by the forest. Pretty interesting stuff. And that's just a bit of Powell River. Okay. Wow. I am so excited to bring you just a snip of Powell River. Actually, let me finish one more thing. Powell River. So I mentioned Powell Lake. Powell River is actually the world's smallest river because it runs only about a mile, kilometer and a half. And that's between Powell Lake and the ocean. And remember, there's a dam in there. And so Powell River is only a very, very small body of water. It's pretty incredible. Anyway, so that is excuse me. Oh, geez. That is Powell River. Okay, so here's your call to action. I encourage you, I challenge you, go to your favorite website, your favorite internet provider, and go to powellriver.ca, and take a bigger look at this incredible gem that was named in 2004 the Cultural Capital of Canada. Pretty cool, 2004. Powellriver.ca. That's got lots more info on what's going on. I am super excited to have guests in the future that have way more history of the First Nations and the development of Powell River, and hopefully Powell River business as well. I'm looking forward to having you learn more about the little gem that we live in Canada. And that's it for today's episode. Let me know your comments and questions by emailing me at learn@mylifeasalandlord.com. Just remember that questions and comments create the next podcasts and resources. And just a reminder, if you have not checked out the blackout bingo cards on the website, mylifeasalandlord.com, these are free and they are designed to help set you up, whether you are a newbie landlord, a growing landlord, or a landlord in a pickle. There is something there to help you and it's free. So please check out those blackout bingo cards. Join me for next week's podcast, which is landlord based. That will be episode number 47. And we're going to be talking with fellow Powell Riverite, Scott Cameron. And we're going to be talking about landlord and tenant insurance in Canada. We're going to be talking about Canadian insurance and stuff. Thanks for joining me this week. I will see you there.